In 1985, paramedics in Quincy, Illinois, began falling violently ill after eating at work unaware their food had been laced with arsenic by a new colleague, Michael Swango. Michael Swango was born in Tacoma, Washington in 1954. He grew up and went to school mostly in Illinois. He went to Southern Illinois University for medical school. Faculty worried about his behavior and ability. He still finished medical school after extra work. Staff said patients he cared for often got suddenly much worse. People started calling him 00 Swango. The nickname suggested that patients often had serious medical emergencies shortly after he was on the ward. During an obstetrics and gynecology rotation, he was caught faking patient checkups. He nearly got expelled. Instead, he repeated the rotation and did extra assignments, then graduated. In 1985, while working as a paramedic in Quincy, Illinois, he put arsenic into coworkers' food and drink. Several coworkers became very ill. He was convicted for poisoning them. The court gave him a 5-year sentence. He served about 2 years and was released in 1987. Hospitals and licensing boards did not fully connect the signs against him. Even after a criminal conviction and links to suspicious patient cases, he kept finding medical positions in different states and overseas. Ohio State University let his internship simply expire instead of formally firing him. Some residency programs accepted forged paperwork or missed red flags. He moved from Virginia to New York and then worked in Zimbabwe and Zambia, despite reports of patients becoming very ill and some later dying while he was on duty. In 2000, federal prosecutors charged him in connection with 3 cases from 1993 at a Veterans Affairs hospital on Long Island. In September 2000, he pleaded guilty to counts, saying he had intentionally ended 3 patients' lives. He also pleaded guilty to fraud and conspiracy for lying on job applications. Under a plea agreement that avoided the most severe punishment, he was given 3 consecutive life sentences with no chance of release. In a separate Ohio case, in October 2000, he pleaded guilty in the 1984 poisoning that took 9-year-old Cynthia Ann McGee's life at Ohio State University Medical Center. For that case, he received a life sentence that technically allowed for parole consideration after 20 years. Because of his federal sentences, he will remain in prison for life. He is serving those federal life terms at ADX Florence, a top-security federal prison. He asked to be moved there after another inmate caused him a serious injury. That move shows how seriously authorities viewed his actions and how much risk he posed, even among other inmates. Swango kept moving from job to job while patients fell ill. The next doctor's confession shocked the public and changed hospital safety laws. Charles Cullen is a widely known U.S. case of a medical professional found responsible for many patient passings. He was born in 1960. He grew up in West Orange, New Jersey. From a young age, he was interested in medicine. He trained in nursing and later worked in hospital care. Cullen began his medical work as a nurse in the early 1980s. He then worked at several hospitals in New Jersey and later in Pennsylvania. On paper, he looked like a competent clinician. Behind the scenes, a harmful pattern was happening. He later admitted to causing the passing of at least 40 patients over about 2 decades. Investigators think the true number could be much higher, possibly over 300. He usually gave overdoses of medication. The medicines named in reports include insulin and potassium chloride. These doses led to life-ending outcomes. The people affected were often vulnerable patients who depended on hospital care. People have tried to explain why a caregiver would do this. Cullen gave several reasons during interviews. He sometimes said he thought he was easing suffering. He also said he felt bored, frustrated, and underappreciated at work. He described a need to feel in control. Those statements suggest multiple personal and work factors combined to create a dangerous mindset. His actions began in the early 1990s. For many years, hospitals did not spot the pattern. Cullen moved between jobs a lot. He often left positions under suspicious circumstances. Employers did not always report those situations. That allowed him to keep working at other hospitals. In 2003, 2 nurses at Somerset Medical Center in New Jersey raised concerns. The New Jersey Attorney General opened an investigation. Cullen was arrested. He gave many admissions to investigators. The legal process was long and complex. Cullen pleaded guilty to many counts tied to patients passing and to attempts to cause the same. He made this plea in exchange for avoiding capital punishment. During hearings, prosecutors showed medical records, witness statements, and Cullen's own admissions. He said at first he felt no remorse. Later, he expressed regret. At sentencing in 2006, The judge gave him 18 consecutive life terms with no chance of parole. The judge said his actions broke the trust between caregivers and patients. Cullen was sent to the New Jersey State Prison in Trenton. He remains there. At his sentencing hearing, he said, "I accept full responsibility for my actions and the pain I have caused. I am deeply sorry." Those words were short. They showed a moment of acceptance after years of denial. The Cullen case led hospitals and regulators to change how staff concerns are reported and checked. It raised tough questions about how someone could move between medical jobs while causing harm. Those policy changes aim to prevent similar cases in the future. As of 2025, Cullen is 70 years old and still serving his life terms in New Jersey. No, what about a surgeon that caused even more lasting harm inside the operating room? Christopher Duntsch was a neurosurgeon. He was born in 1971 and grew up in Texas. He trained in medicine and started his career with high expectations. Soon his work went badly wrong. Over a few years, he operated on at least 33 patients. Many of those people suffered very serious harm. Some became unable to move parts of their bodies. Others lost organs. A number of patients did not survive their procedures. Colleagues warned about his work. He ignored those warnings. Some staff said he seemed disoriented during operations, slurring his words and making erratic decisions. There are reports he sometimes performed operations while under the influence. Hospital leaders and the Texas medical regulator received complaints. They did not stop him quickly enough. That failure allowed more patients to be harmed. One hospital quietly let him resign with a letter of recommendation, allowing him to get hired elsewhere. Investigators stepped in after one patient became paralyzed and another did not survive. The probe showed many examples of unsafe and careless surgery. Witnesses at trial described operations that left patients with severe, lifelong impairments. One witness said a spinal cord was cut during surgery. Another described a spinal fusion that left a patient unable to use their legs. Medical experts testified that his techniques were so reckless they could only be explained as intentional harm, not mere incompetence. Prosecutors said he knew he lacked the skill needed and kept operating anyway. They argued he put his career and money before patient safety. The court weighed whether his actions were due to incompetence alone or something more. In 2017, Duntsch was found guilty on a serious charge for causing severe harm in one case. He later pled guilty to additional charges tied to other patients who were harmed or did not survive. A judge sentenced him to life behind bars with no chance of parole. He is held at the O.B. Ellis unit in Huntsville, Texas. At sentencing, he gave little sign of regret. When asked if he wanted to speak to victims or their families, he said, "I never meant to hurt anyone." Let's move on to a respected doctor's clinic that became the scene of one of America's darkest medical cases. Kermit Gosnell grew up in Philadelphia. He trained as a physician and earned his MD in the 1960s. For decades, he ran the Women's Medical Society Clinic on Lancaster Avenue in West Philadelphia. On the surface, he looked like a community doctor. He ran local programs. He ran a rehab halfway house. He had long ties to the neighborhood. Behind that public image, the clinic had serious problems. The clinic mainly served poor, immigrant, and minority women. Staff records later showed poor medical practices. There were repeated failures to follow basic safety rules. Unlicensed workers did medical jobs. There were reports of botched procedures. Complaints and lawsuits came up over many years. Regulators were alerted several times. Inspections and enforcement were limited or ineffective. On February 18, 2010, a federal and state search began. It started as an inquiry into illegal prescription practices. It expanded into a probe of much more serious issues. Investigators found unsanitary rooms. Instruments were often not sterilized. They found bags and jars with fetal remains. They found evidence that staff had cut the spinal cords of infants who moved after birth. A grand jury later described the scene in detail. Staff testimony played a major role. Several employees said it was treated as a routine practice there to stop infants who showed signs of life after being delivered. One staff member said he had cut the spinal cords of more than 100 infants. Other witnesses described women left injured in recovery. They also reported medical equipment that did not work. A patient named Karnamaya Mongar lost her life after treatment at the clinic in 2009. Prosecutors said she was given a very high dose of medication during a procedure and later passed. Her case became a separate example of unsafe care at the clinic. The grand jury reported that intact fetal remains of 47 were found in various places in the building. They were in freezers, jars, and cartons. The jury used this finding to show a pattern of practice rather than isolated errors. The grand jury also asked why this went on so long. Their report pointed to repeated failures by oversight agencies. Reports from hospitals, health department employees, and other professionals reached state offices for years. The response was slow and often ineffective. The jury said that regulatory neglect and a slow reaction allowed the dangerous practices to continue. Gosnell was arrested in January 2011. He faced many charges, including counts tied to the fatalities of infants and the adult patient who had lost her life. His state trial took place in spring 2013. Over several weeks, prosecutors presented graphic and disturbing testimony from former staff, medical experts, and others. Defense lawyers argued the evidence was unreliable and tried to raise doubt about eyewitness accounts. On May 13, 2013, the jury found him guilty on several of the most serious state counts. That included 3 first-degree counts related to infants the jury concluded were born alive and then deliberately stopped. The jury also found him guilty of involuntary manslaughter in the case of Karnamaya Mongar. He was convicted on multiple counts connected to illegal late-term procedures and violations of informed consent laws. Prosecutors had brought additional charges, but the jury focused on those with the strongest evidence. After the convictions, Gosnell waived his right to appeal in a deal that removed the option of the state's highest penalty. In May 2013, a judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole for the state convictions. He later received a 30-year federal sentence tied to illegal prescription practices. He is serving time in a Pennsylvania state prison. The next single pediatric nurse became linked to as many as 60 unexplained child losses. If you find stories like these important, consider subscribing for more. Genene Jones was born in 1950 in Texas. She was adopted by a nightclub owner and his wife. Before she trained as a nurse, she worked as a beautician. By the late 1970s, she finished nursing school. She became a licensed vocational nurse. She worked in the pediatric intensive care unit at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio. She married her high school boyfriend in 1968. They had 1 child. They divorced in 1974. They reconciled in 1977 and had another child. Shortly before her indictment, she briefly married a 19-year-old nursing assistant. That marriage ended quickly. From 1981 to 1982, many infants and young children who were under her care suddenly collapsed or had seizures. A medical journal later noted a large rise in infants who did not survive during shifts when she was on duty. Investigators thought this was more than bad luck. They found evidence that she gave injections of medicines such as digoxin, heparin, and succinylcholine. Those injections caused medical emergencies. Some of those emergencies led to children not surviving. At one clinic, a doctor found puncture marks on a bottle of succinylcholine that only she could access. That discovery raised alarms. On February 15, 1984, she went to trial. The case focused on 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan. Investigators found a very large dose of the muscle relaxant succinylcholine had been given to the child. She was also charged with causing serious harm to other children. The jury convicted her. A judge sentenced her to 99 years for 1 count and to a concurrent 60 years for another. Those sentences meant many decades behind bars. Even after that conviction, the full scope of what happened stayed unclear. Some reports connect her to between 46 and 60 children who did not survive while she worked. But only 2 of those cases were proven in court at that time. Texas law then allowed early release for good behavior. That made her potentially eligible for release as early as March 2018. Victims' families and prosecutors kept pushing to reopen cases. In 2017, she faced new charges tied to several cases from 1981 to 1982, including the case of Joshua Sawyer. During those hearings, prosecutors played recorded statements. In a 1998 parole interview, she reportedly told an officer she had caused some children to not survive. A fellow inmate later said Jones claimed she was not responsible and blamed voices in her head. On January 16, 2020, she accepted a plea deal. She admitted guilt for the December 12, 1981, case of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer. The court gave her a life sentence. In exchange, 4 other related charges were dropped. At sentencing, a judge said, "You took God's most precious gift, babies," and noted that final judgment would come in the next life. After that plea, she would not be eligible for parole until roughly age 87. Jones targeted children under her care. Now, how does someone trusted with care turn medication into a weapon? Dr. Tseng was a general practitioner. She got her medical license in 1997. In 2005, she opened a small clinic called Advanced Care AAA Medical in Rowland Heights, east of Los Angeles. That neighborhood has many immigrant families from Asia. She also had ties to local hospitals. Over time, her practice shifted. She started giving out large amounts of prescription medications more than offering other kinds of medical care. Between 2007 and 2009, at least 9 patients lost their lives while under her care after taking those medications. Investigators later found she had written over 0 prescriptions in 3 years. That works out to more than 25 prescriptions a day on average. 3 young men who later lost their lives were Vu Nguyen, 28, from Lake Forest, Stephen Ogle, about 24-25, from Palm Desert, and Joseph Joey Rovero, 21, from San Ramon, a student at Arizona State. Many patients who came to her clinic were not local. That raised questions about why they traveled there. Her prescriptions often mixed several types of medications. That included opioid painkillers such as oxycodone or methadone, sedatives like Xanax, muscle relaxers, and stimulants such as Adderall. Combining these medicines greatly raised the chance of a fatal outcome. Pharmacists, coroners, and others warned her that patients were dying. Despite the warnings, she continued to prescribe large amounts of controlled medications. Her clinic reportedly took in about $5 million over that period. Some days the clinic took more than $3 million in cash. A key question was whether she understood the harm her actions caused. The record shows she got repeated warnings but continued the same behavior. That suggested she ignored the risks. In October 2015, a jury convicted her. The verdict included 3 counts of second-degree homicide, 19 counts for unlawful prescribing of controlled medications, and 1 count for obtaining a controlled medication by fraud. The case was notable because it was the first time a physician in the U.S. was found guilty under a homicide charge tied to overprescribing. On February 5, 2016, a judge sentenced her to 30 years to life in state prison. That means she must serve at least 3 decades before she can be considered for parole. At the sentencing hearing, she wore blue scrubs and spoke to the families. She said, "I'm really terribly sorry. I have been and forever will be praying for you. May God bless all of you and grant comfort to all who have been affected by my actions." She also wrote, "I was not the doctor I should have been for the patients who came to me. No words can properly describe the sadness." The judge criticized earlier attempts by her defense to shift blame to pharmacists or patients, calling those moves irresponsible. Her conviction was later reviewed on appeal. In December 2018, the Court of Appeal upheld the ruling and kept the sentence, saying her prescribing met the legal standard for homicide because it showed reckless disregard for patient safety. In the next case, a respected doctor's account began to unravel with a single red spatter. Dr. Robert Neulander was a well-known obstetrician-gynecologist in DeWitt, near Syracuse, New York. People in the area saw him as caring. He was active in the local community. He and his wife Leslie had been married for almost 30 years. They had 4 children, Jenna, Ari, Emily, and Brian. The family was known for supporting local causes and for being warm members of the Syracuse Jewish community. On September 17, 2012, something serious happened at their home. Leslie, age 61, was found unresponsive. Dr. Ant A. Neulander called 911 and said she had slipped in the shower. Their daughter Jenna also called 911. In her call, she cried, "Daddy, don't move her." First responders found red stains in the bedroom and bathroom. The pattern of stains did not match a simple slip in the shower. At first, officials treated the event as an accident. A retired medical examiner later reviewed the case. She said the injuries did not fit a fall. She described a very deep head wound that had fractured bone and reached the skull. She also found red spatters and tissue on the headboard. She said these signs pointed to a forceful blow, not an accidental fall. Those findings made investigators doubt the original account. In 2015, a jury found Dr. Neulander guilty of second-degree homicide-related charges and of tampering with evidence. The jury concluded he had inflicted severe injuries and then tried to make the scene look accidental. A judge sentenced him to 20 years to life. That conviction was overturned in 2019. A juror had been texting during the trial and had given false information about those contacts. Because of that misconduct, the court ordered a new trial. In early 2022, prosecutors presented stronger evidence. They showed the tissue found on the headboard. They brought in experts to explain red stains patterns. They questioned the timeline and parts of Dr. Tisa's Lou by Neulander's account. The jury again found him guilty. He was sentenced again to 20 years to life, plus a concurrent term for evidence tampering. He surrendered his medical license. He was moved to Elmira Correctional Facility. As of 2024, New York's highest court denied his appeals. That decision likely ended his attempts to overturn the conviction. His earliest parole date is December 6, 2038. He would be 86 then. At sentencing, he asked the judge for leniency. He said his family had suffered and that he was about to turn 71. He said he had serious medical problems. He asked the court for a small hope that he might pass away surrounded by his family. There is no record of a final meal or any last words. He remains alive and incarcerated. Yazid Essa was an emergency room doctor from Gates Mills, Ohio. He married Rosemarie DiPuccio, a former nurse, in 1999. They had 2 children and were trying for a third. On February 24, 2005, Rosemarie, 38, collapsed while driving her SUV. The vehicle did not show signs of a heavy impact. She had no obvious injuries. Earlier, she had told a friend she felt nauseous. She wondered if a calcium pill her husband had given her might be the cause. Moments later, her vehicle crashed. Bystanders said she seemed confused and was vomiting. She passed away a short time after arriving at the hospital. Toxicology tests later found potassium cyanide in the supplement. The tests showed the calcium pills were contaminated with a toxic substance. Soon after, Yazid left with his 2 young children. He traveled from Detroit to Toronto, then to London Heathrow, then to Cyprus, and finally to Beirut, Lebanon. While abroad, a friend gave him false identification and helped him find places to stay. Authorities spent nearly 3 years trying to bring him back. In October 2006, police arrested him in Cyprus. After a long extradition fight, he returned to Ohio in January 2009. His bond was set at many millions. In January 2010, his trial began. Prosecutors said he feared divorce, financial loss, and losing the woman he was seeing. They argued those fears gave him a motive. The defense said he had been unfaithful but still loved his wife and had no reason to cause her harm. Witnesses described his affair with a nurse named Michelle Stevens. She told jurors that the day before Rosemarie became ill, he asked, "If something bad were to happen, would you stay?" After 7 weeks of testimony and more than 60 witnesses, the jury deliberated for 4 days. They found him guilty of aggravated homicide. At sentencing, the judge asked if he wanted to speak. He answered only, "Yes," and then did not speak to the court. Rosemarie's brother stood up and asked him, "Are you a man?" The judge then sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Up next, an affair that began with Botox ended with life in prison. Dr. Thomas Michael Dixon was a plastic surgeon in Amarillo, Texas. He owned Sensi Med Spa and worked in cosmetic practice early in his career. In 2008, he met Rochelle Shatina during a Botox visit. They began an affair. That relationship caused major problems at home. His wife filed for divorce. Dixon's relationship with Rochelle became unstable. In 2011, Rochelle ended the relationship. She then started seeing Dr. Joseph Saunier, a pathologist in Lubbock. Dixon could not let go. He grew more and more jealous. On July 10, 2012, Dr. Saunier was found in his Lubbock home with multiple gunshot wounds and several puncture wounds from a sharp object. Authorities treated the scene as a targeted homicide. It did not look like a random theft. Rochelle and Saunier had met in dance classes. They grew close. They even traveled together, including a trip to Paris. Dixon asked his friend and business partner, David Shepard, to watch Saunier and Rochelle. At first, Dixon wanted photos of Saunier with other women. That plan failed. Dixon then offered Shepard payment, 3 silver bars and a box of Cuban cigars. Shepard agreed to carry out the plan. On July 10, Shepard carried out the plan. Saunier was shot 5 times and suffered 11 puncture wounds as he arrived home from work. A landscaper found him the next day. A tip followed. Paul Reynolds, Shepard's roommate, told police Shepard had admitted his role and said Dixon arranged it. Shepard led investigators to the weapon. It was recovered from a lake behind Dixon's office and was traced to Dixon's brother. The first trial in October 2014 ended in a mistrial. Shepard told the court he acted alone. Jurors had reasonable doubt about Dixon's role and about whether Dixon meant for someone to be harmed or only to spy. At a second trial in November 2015, Shepard's daughter Haley gave testimony that contradicted her father. The jury convicted Dixon on 2 counts of a capital-level homicide charge. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In December 2018, the 7th Court of Appeals overturned the conviction. The court pointed to problems with cell site evidence and to a violation of Dixon's right to a public trial. In early 2020, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals reversed that decision. It called the errors harmless and reinstated the conviction. Dixon was returned to prison. He remains in custody and is using state-level appeals. Dr. William Valuck worked quietly in his cash-only clinic. He was a pain management doctor. Before this, he worked in emergency medicine. Later, he opened advanced care in southwest Oklahoma City. In 2013, investigators found that he wrote 12 more prescriptions than any other doctor in Oklahoma. This was a huge number. Some local pharmacies refused to fill his prescriptions because they thought it was not good medical practice. Families started to notice something was wrong. In court, one person held a photo of their lost family member. They said, "I hope you're haunted by all of the pictures of our loved ones who are not here." How did these prescriptions lead to serious charges? 8 of Valuck's patients passed away because of too many substances in their system. They were a strong mix of pain medicine and sedatives that he gave them. One case was related to a car accident, not the prescriptions. So prosecutors dropped that charge. This left 8 counts of second-degree charges against him. In August 2014, Valuck was about 71 or 72 years old. He pleaded guilty to those 8 counts. He did this to get a lighter sentence. Other charges about giving out medicine without proper cause, more than 57 or even 72 counts were dropped. His plea helped avoid a long trial and gave some closure to the families. What punishment did he get? Why was there a deal? The judge gave him 10 years for each count, but 2 years were taken off for each count. This left him with 8 years in prison. He also got 2 years of probation. The prosecutor said, since he is almost 72 years old, 8 years in prison was fair. Valuck will likely be about 80 years old before he can ask for early release. When asked about his plea, Valuck said it was not him admitting he was guilty. He said he did it to survive the harsh jail conditions. He said, "There was no way I could survive. I could not get to trial. I would have been gone." He talked about serious health problems in jail like skin infections, kidney failure, and swelling. The next Army doctor's wife was pregnant. His children were asleep and, by morning, all 3 were gone. Jeffrey Robert MacDonald was born in 1943. He grew up in Jamaica, Queens, New York. His family belonged to the working class. He was a bright student and very ambitious. In high school, he was voted most popular and most likely to succeed. There, he met Colette Stevenson, who later became his wife. Their teenage romance started again while he studied pre-med at Princeton University. They got married in 1963. Colette was pregnant with their first child, Kimberly, at the time. MacDonald later finished medical school at Northwestern University. He joined the U.S. Army and became a Green Beret doctor. This role gave him a reputation for being heroic and disciplined. But there was another side to his life. On February 17, 1970, everything changed for MacDonald. His life fell apart during one terrible night. It was a night filled with danger that made him one of the most talked-about family cases in the country. At 3:42 a.m., military police at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, got a panicked call from MacDonald. He said, "Help, 544 Castle Drive, something violent, hurry." When officers arrived, the scene was shocking. Colette, who was 26 years old and pregnant, was badly hurt. She had been hit and struck 37 times. Her body was partly covered by MacDonald's torn pajama top. Their 5-year-old daughter, Kimberly, had been hit and wounded in the neck. 2-year-old Kristen had 48 wounds from an ice pick. Her tiny finger was almost cut off because she tried to protect herself. MacDonald was barely awake and had some shallow wounds. He said 4 intruders had targeted them. He said there were 3 men and a woman who were chanting strange words. The word pig was written with red body substance on the headboard, which reminded people of the Manson murders. But police soon found problems with MacDonald's story. Why were there no pajama fibers in the living room, where MacDonald said the event happened? Why was Colette's DNA on his glasses? The evidence seemed like someone had staged the scene. Threads from MacDonald's pajamas were found under Colette's body. His red footprint was found leading from Kristen's room. These facts did not match his story about a fight in the living room. People still debate why MacDonald did what he did. Some, like author Joe McGinnis, think MacDonald lost control during a rage caused by using amphetamines. They say he was angry because of his family's demands. Others point to problems in his marriage. Colette had told friends about his bad temper. The couple often fought. Prosecutors said MacDonald, who they called a narcissist, hurt his family because he wanted to live without responsibility. Did MacDonald copy the Manson cases to avoid blame? He had a magazine about those cases in his home, which made people think this was true. But MacDonald kept saying the intruders were real. He named Helena Stokely, a local woman who used substances, and matched the description of the woman in the incident. Stokely sometimes said she was there. Other times, she took back her statements. MacDonald's legal journey started with a military hearing in 1970. The charges were dropped because of lack of proof. But his father-in-law, Freddie Kassab, pushed for a civilian trial. In 1979, after a 7-week trial, the jury found MacDonald guilty. He was convicted of 2 counts of second-degree harm for Colette and Kimberly. He was found guilty of first-degree harm for Kristen. On August 29, 1979, MacDonald was sentenced to 3 life terms in prison. He is now 81 years old and is held at FCI Cumberland, Maryland. He can apply for parole in 2071, which is very late in life. Did MacDonald ever show regret? No. In a 2012 court hearing, Joe McGinnis called MacDonald a person who lacks feeling for what happened. He said MacDonald saw the victims as people who got in his way, not as his wife and children. MacDonald's last public words were strong: "I am innocent. The system failed me." James Craig was a dentist working in Aurora, Colorado. He was married to Angela Craig. Angela was 43 years old. She was a mother of 6 and led the local church choir. They had been married for more than 20 years. James was trusted by his family and community, but that trust would break because of a serious and dark event. Angela was loved by her family. She was one of 10 siblings. She cared deeply for her children. In the days before she became very ill in March 2023, she had strong symptoms. These included dizziness, fainting, vomiting, and confusion. Doctors could not figure out what was wrong with her. She had to go to the hospital several times. Meanwhile, James acted like a devoted husband, even while this was happening. During about 10 days in March 2023, James slowly harmed Angela by adding dangerous substances to her protein shakes. He used arsenic, cyanide, and tetrahydrozoline, which is found in eye drops. Angela's health got worse, and doctors admitted her to the hospital. While she was there, James gave her a final harmful dose of cyanide through her IV. Soon after, Angela was declared brain dead, and life support was stopped. Why would someone hurt the person they promised to care for? The reason became clear during the investigation. Prosecutors said James was stuck in a difficult marriage. His dental practice was failing, and money problems were building up. He was involved with other women, but did not want to divorce Angela. Angela's $4 million life insurance and James's reputation were important to him. At the trial, many pieces of evidence came out. Investigators found James's internet searches. He had looked up questions like, how to make a passing look like a heart attack, and is there such thing as an undetectable poison, and how long does it take for arsenic poisoning to end a life? Security cameras showed him entering Angela's hospital room with a syringe. Shortly after that, Angela's condition worsened. James faced charges, including first-degree intentional harm leading to loss. He was also charged with trying to interfere with evidence, trying to get people to lie in court, and trying to get someone to cause harm to the lead investigator. He even tried to get his daughter to make a fake video to suggest Angela was thinking about hurting herself. 2 of James's daughters spoke in court. They rejected the claim that Angela was thinking of hurting herself. One daughter remembered her mother being happy and excited about plans for their future home and new friends she wanted to make. The daughters also said James told them to create false evidence and contact inmates to lie for him. The jury did not accept the defense that Angela caused her own condition. After 9 hours of discussion, James was found guilty on all charges. On July 30, 2025, the judge gave James the required punishment. He was sentenced to spend life in prison without any chance of release for the main charge. He also received extra prison terms totaling 33 years for the other charges. The judge said James caused destruction like a tornado, wide and devastating. Up next is a respected surgeon, a missing wife, and a 2-hour flight that hid a fatal secret. Robert Bierenbaum was once well respected. He was a plastic surgeon who spoke 5 languages. He loved cooking, skiing, and flying planes. He even took women on romantic flights to impress them. In August 1982, he married Gail Katz. She was studying clinical psychology in graduate school. At first, they looked like a perfect couple, but there was a darker side to Robert. People close to Gail described him as controlling and cruel. Once, he forced food into Gail's mouth at a restaurant. On another occasion, he tried to drown her cat in their toilet. Gail called her sister in tears, saying Robert wanted her to get rid of the cat. He wanted to see if she really loved him. When Gail was caught smoking on their balcony, Robert put his hands around her neck until she passed out. She reported this to the police, but nothing happened. Gail also saw a therapist, who warned her she should leave Robert. The therapist feared Robert might seriously harm her, but Gail delayed leaving. On July 7, 1985, Gail disappeared from their apartment on East 85th Street in Manhattan. Robert told the police that she left angrily after an argument and that he stayed home. But her family did not believe him. The detective found something strange. Robert had taken a 2-hour flight that same day in his small plane from Essex County, New Jersey. But he changed the flight records to show the trip happened the next day. Prosecutors thought this meant Robert had hurt Gail, then put her body on the plane and threw it into the ocean. In 1989, a torso was found in the water, but DNA tests showed it was not Gail's. The case stayed open for many years. Families and investigators did not give up. The fake flight records were a key piece of evidence. How could Robert be trusted if he lied about where he flew on the day his wife went missing? Finally, in October 2000, Robert was put on trial. The jury found him guilty of ending Gail's life in a second-degree charge. They reached this decision in less than 7 hours. On November 29, 2000, he was given a sentence of 20 years to life in a New York State prison. Robert appealed the decision, but the court rejected his appeal in 2002. Since then, he has been held at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. It is a maximum security prison north of Manhattan. For many years, Robert said he was innocent. But in December 2020, at a parole hearing, he admitted the truth. He said he wanted Gail to stop yelling at him, so he grabbed her forcefully. He admitted holding her by the neck until she was no longer moving, then boarding the plane, opening the door, and releasing her body into the ocean. He said he was immature and didn't know how to control his anger. When prosecutors heard this, one said, "Holy sway, are you kidding me?" Their theory, made years before, was finally proven right in the most direct way. The next doctor was accused of ending 24 lives, and though he walked free, the fallout cost millions. William Scott Husel was born in 1975. He grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. He did well in school and sports. He was the captain of his high school basketball team at St. Ignatius. In 2000, he earned a degree in microbiology from Ohio State University. Later, in 2008, he got his medical degree from Ohio University College of Osteopathic Medicine. By 2013, he finished his training in critical care medicine at the Cleveland Clinic. After that, he started working as an ICU doctor at Mount Carmel West Hospital in Columbus. In October 2017, he married Mariah Baird, who worked as a registered nurse. Between February 2015 and November 2018, many very sick ICU patients under Husel's care passed away after getting unusually large doses of a strong pain medicine during the process of removing ventilators. Investigators later found 34 such cases, though 6 were thought to be unrelated to his actions. On November 20, 2018, after the passing of Melissa Penix, who received high doses, Mount Carmel stopped Husel from treating patients. He was officially fired on December 5, 2018. The hospital also informed state authorities and started its own review. On June 5, 2019, Husel turned himself in after being charged with 25 counts related to overdose losses. Before the trial started, a judge dropped 11 of those counts. The trial began on February 22, 2022. Both sides had strong feelings about the case. The lawyers for the state said Husel gave doses of medicine that were extremely high, sometimes described as enough to stop an elephant. They suggested he wanted to speed up their end, not just ease pain. Husel's defense said he was giving comfort care to patients who were already dying. They said Ohio law protects this kind of care if done in good faith at the end of life. Husel himself asked why a doctor would end a life after saving it with CPR, pointing out the contradiction. The prosecution called 53 witnesses. These included expert doctors, hospital staff, and family members of the patients. They focused on the very high doses and said they were not medically needed. The defense called only one expert, Dr. Joel Zivot. He said the patients passed because of their illnesses, not because of the medicine doses. The main question was clear. Was Husel a doctor trying to offer comfort at the end, or was he crossing the line and causing harm? On April 20, 2022, after several days of deciding, the jury found Husel not guilty on all 14 charges that were tried, including lesser charges related to attempts to cause harm. If he had been found guilty on even one, he could have faced life in prison with a chance for parole after 15 years. A few weeks later, Husel gave up his medical license. On May 5, 2022, Ohio officially took away his license. They made it clear that being found not guilty in court did not stop them from taking professional action against him. Even though the court cleared him, Mount Carmel settled several lawsuits related to patient losses for millions of dollars. In 2025, Husel started a defamation lawsuit against Mount Carmel. He said they treated him unfairly during the investigation. He recently gave testimony in this ongoing case, defending the amounts of medicine he gave and saying the patients passed because of their illnesses, not the medicine.